Eckhart Tolle, the author of The Power of Now, always talks about this state of consciousness that is beyond the conceptual thinking. So he talks about being in a state of consciousness that does not involve any conceptual thinking whatsoever. So you can be in extreme awareness of what you're experiencing. You can have, a deep experience, being very connected to what you're experiencing, but you won't be thinking anything at all. And a lot of people don't think this is possible, but even I can say that I've achieved this state a lot in my life, especially when I'm doing things like recording a video. So when I'm extremely focused on the video that I'm recording, I can be very aware of, the camera and the movements of my hands and what I'm saying, but I won't be thinking anything at all. Or when I'm beatboxing, I'm so involved in, the beats that I'm doing, I'm not going to be thinking anything at all. Or even sometimes when I'm talking to a person, I'm very focused on their eyes, and I'm focused on the breathing that's going on in my body, and I'm just so focused on the conversation and what I'm listening to that sometimes I get into this state of consciousness where I'm just not thinking whatsoever. And so the way to stop thinking is really to understand, first of all, that this state of consciousness is possible. And the best way, I personally think, to get there is to get an experience of it. And a lot of times we actually get glimpses of this state of consciousness. We just don't necessarily realize it. Eckhart Tolle always talks about this. And some of the examples that he gives are, sometimes you're in nature and you see, a lot of trees, a lot of nature, and then you connect to this part of yourself where for a couple moments, you actually might not be thinking at all. You might have no conceptual thinking whatsoever, but then you don't realize that this is happening. And it doesn't take long before, you're seeing, for example, a tree, you're looking at the tree and, you really fully take it in that moment. You're really just taking in the visual perception of that tree. And then it doesn't take long before, the voice in your head actually interprets the tree. And you don't realize that you're doing this, and a lot of people don't, but the thing is you can consciously actually put an intention to get into that state of consciousness with practice. And so it's very possible. A lot of people don't think it's possible, but even with a little bit of mindfulness meditation practice, that's a great way to enter that state of consciousness where you're very aware, you're very focused, you're very conscious, but you're not thinking anything. So you can be very in the moment with what you're doing, whether that be looking at something or hearing something, or just very involved in the task that you're doing, but you won't be thinking at all. And so you won't have any conceptual thinking that's really going on. You're just going to be very conscious. This happens to me a lot sometimes when I'm even looking at the clock in my room downstairs. When I'm just looking at the clock and I just really look at it for a long enough period of time with enough focus and intention, what happens is that my thinking begins to just completely turn off. And so whenever I experience this state of consciousness and then I listen to Eckhart Tolle after, I understand exactly what he's saying, because you can enter this state where you're very aware once again of what you're looking at, and you're not really thinking about it, but you're still aware. So it just doesn't take away any consciousness within you. It actually gives you more consciousness, and you can actually train this part of yourself by practicing things like meditation, because when you're meditating, what you're really doing is you're consciously putting in the intention to practice that part of, that deeper part of yourself where you're focused and you're very concentrated on that part of yourself that is aware, but not necessarily thinking. And some people can't get to this state quickly. Sometimes it's just about getting little glimpses of it throughout your day, or maybe even meditation. And a quick example would be, you can be aware of the sensation of your breath, and then, for 2 seconds, you're actually aware of this inner part of yourself where, you're feeling the sensation of your breath, but you're not thinking. And then quickly, the thought comes in 2 seconds later, and then, now the glimpse of that presence is gone. But then the key is to be aware that this, state of consciousness actually exists. But then once you're aware that it does exist, what you can do is practice to increase those spaces where you're not necessarily thinking. Because when you're not thinking for those little glimpses, and like in those examples that I gave, the key to understand is that you can actually increase those spaces and make them longer. So you're going to be not in that state of consciousness just for 2 seconds, like, when you're in nature, or, you see something beautiful. Or another example Eckhart Tolle gives sometimes is when you're in a deep state of danger. So like if something dangerous happens, I think the example that he gave was rock climbing or when you're mountain climbing, right? You're very conscious, but you can't really be thinking because you got to really be focused on what you're doing. And so these are the glimpses that you can get sometimes. But I think it's important to understand that it doesn't have to come in just glimpses, but we can actually train this part of our mind to increase those spaces. Because even for me, I know from personal experience, after meditating every single day for the last 3 years, that I can get very, very focused on what I'm doing. And even while I'm recording this video right now, I'm not really thinking that much. I'm just focused on the camera. I'm just sort of speaking, and then everything that I'm saying kind of comes very natural because I'm not really focused on what I'm thinking about. I'm just focused on the act of what I'm doing. And it's almost like another word you can use is being. You're just so connected to the part of you that is beyond thought. And it's not really falling below thought, it's actually falling above thought, as Eckhart Tolle says it. And these are all just simple words to represent what it actually is. So don't get too caught up in the words. It's more about the experience and the awareness of what you're doing without really thinking about it. And so this is really powerful. And if you can practice this part of yourself, in everyday tasks, like when you're doing simple things like, brushing your teeth in the morning, or you're opening the car door, you can incorporate this part of yourself where you just start to become aware of, maybe the sensation of your breath while you're doing things. And then so what happens is you're not going to be thinking, but you're going to be, you're going to be just feeling the sensation of your breath, or maybe just really connected to the moment. And you can incorporate this more and more and more into your everyday life. And this is going to help you to completely eliminate thinking if you actually practice this habit long enough. Because the more you practice this, the better you get at it. And then the better you get at it, you can incorporate it more and more and more into other parts of your life where you're not going to be really thinking. You're just going to be sort of involved in what you're doing. And a lot of people find this really hard to believe, but it is one of those things that you can achieve just by practicing. Because in a lot of my videos, I do say that mindfulness is not about getting rid of the thoughts and just sort of observing them. But now what I'm realizing, and I always knew this on a deeper level, I just didn't really connect the dots to confidently articulate it. I'm realizing that when you develop a level of presence that is extremely high, you can actually eliminate conceptual thinking completely. You can completely eliminate conceptual thinking where you're going to be so focused on what it is that you're doing that you won't be thinking at all. And like I said, people think that this is impossible, but I'm telling you right now that it is possible. And you should be motivated to, strive for the state of consciousness. And that's why I think the meditation is so important. And knowing that this is possible might motivate you to start something like a meditation habit. Because although mindfulness is not about getting rid of the thoughts, you can get to a state of consciousness where you're not thinking whatsoever because you're so present to the moment and you're really taking in the experience of what's happening. So this is something you can practice. And I hope that this video motivates you to practice it a little bit more, because when you practice meditation, or even just incorporating these little glimpses consciously, rather than not realizing that you're getting those glimpses, but consciously focusing on them, what this is going to do is it's going to train the habit in your mind to get to a state where you're not really thinking as much, where you can sort of choose to think when you feel like it rather than the mind controlling you. You can be in a state of consciousness where you're not thinking. And when you do decide to think, the thinking that you have will be much more effective. Right? If you read Eckhart Tolle, you'll start to notice that a lot of the stuff that I'm saying is exactly what Eckhart Tolle teaches, but I've been doing it for so long that I feel like I've embodied his teachings in a way where I really understand them, not just through the conceptual level where I understand what he's saying intellectually, but I have a lot of experience when it comes to the teachings that he gives and how to incorporate it. So when you practice this, you can expect to get a lot better at it, but it takes a little bit of training and you got to build the habit up. So I hope this video motivates you in some way or form. If you guys like this kind of content more than the other kind of content that I do, consider hitting that subscribe button and that notification button. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this. So I hope this video gave you some value. Have yourself a great day and see you in the next video.